And it's a superpower that a lot of men have not learned, not because they're not doing a good job, but because people around them have decided men don't need to learn this stuff. Men don't need to know what they're feeling or what they're thinking. It's unnecessary. What they need to do is like push through, suck it up, right? I think that's messaging that a lot of us, I know I have it in my head, and it is like job one. It is like very first class, very first thing you're going to hear is like, so what are you feeling right now? What goes on in your body right now? And my aim is when my wife says, what are you thinking? What are you thinking about right now? What's going on in your head? That I don't look at her and go like, nothing. That's stupid. It's stupid and it's childish. You do know what you're thinking. You do have thoughts and feelings. We need practices to help us actually like figure that out. And yoga is such a great place to start for that stuff. It's cheaper than therapy. It's way more fun. And it's at a bare minimum. It will make you feel better along the way.
Colin, so Larry and I have been pals for a couple of years now, and we actually met through this podcast. Larry was a good friend of my cousin's who said, you guys got to connect. And when Larry and I were first catching up and talking about our interest in yoga, your podcast came up. We both had found it during the pandemic. I think Larry at the time was mentioning the psychedelics episode that you did, which was one of the later ones in season 1. Mm. And so that's how you got on our radar. And we just want to say, we just thought it was such a great season you put on with Yoga History podcast. I know it's on pause right now, and you have a season 2 ready to go. But what inspired you to kick that off? And tell us more about how you envisioned how to do that, the stories you wanted to share, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, a lot of it just came from I was teaching a 300 level religious studies course on the history of yoga. And what would happen is I would almost every single lecture get in these like little rabbit holes where something would come up, somebody asked me a question, and I just had a bunch of really good stories that I was like, well, I don't want to tell you about thing X until I tell you about thing Y. In order to know thing Y, I should tell you the story. And then like a half hour later, it'd be like, okay, class is over, bye. And yeah, at some point, I guess I was just like, I should probably record some of these things. There's some good material here. And not everybody can come to the University of Regina for a religious studies course. So yeah, I had this idea of just like, I'm just going to record them. And I did a little bit of research, you know what I mean? Just sort of like tidied up some loose ends and made sure a lot of the stuff that I remembered was actually accurate. So some research time. And then I wrote all the episodes out ahead of time. So they are like loosely scripted. Each of them actually has a script that I wouldn't read verbatim, but I would actually have the script handy just to make sure I was roughly kind of on track. And talking about this stuff for me is really fun. It's enjoyable. And yeah, the idea of like, two dudes who I don't know, just tuning in and listening to this. Even then, before it was ever actually a podcast, I was like, that's freaking awesome. Like what a cool way to connect with people. It's so much fun. And so that was what sort of like inspired it. Was like, these stories are there anyway. I don't see anybody else doing this. Like, I just don't see it out there.
No. Yeah.
So to me, it's fascinating. It's underrepresented, and it's a good time. Sign me up.
Aside from these two nerds you're talking to right now who like to talk about this stuff, what was the response, man? I mean, again, it was the pandemic. Everybody podcast, took a big jump at that time. What was the response to the show, particularly in this space?
I mean, fairly positive, but like, it's not like things change. You know what I mean? Like I'm a yoga teacher from a small town in the western part of Canada. It's not like all producers come calling. You know what I mean? Yeah. There's not like nothing. So like, yeah, there's good feedback. I got like a couple people, obviously, who are like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. They're,
That's that's going to happen in this area.
for sure.
Someone's going to be like, "Well, it wasn't really my sore. It was actually down
Totally.
the block."
Yeah.
So, were you what kind of folks who you got feedback from? Were there people who were already into yoga, who already were super curious about it? Did you find that people who are totally didn't know any about yoga was super into it?
Yeah. I've had a number of people that are not like yoga people contact me with exactly that feedback. Like, I don't care about yoga. I don't do it. I'm not
All
interested
right.
in it. But that stuff is fascinating. That's really, and so I've heard a fair amount of feedback like that, where like, this podcast is the closest thing I'm going to get to a yoga class.
Yeah. So do you think there's going to be a return for season 2 at some point?
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine so. It's already written. Like, it's the scripts are done for them. I'm still sort of holding out some hope that the original producer of the podcast will step up and connect with me again and give me some resources to be able to. I just want it. You see, this is the problem of doing something good. It's good. I listen to it now and I'm like, that's good. I had an excellent sound engineer. I love the guy.
It's really well produced.
It is.
Yeah.
The production quality is really, really nice. I don't want to do season 2 now in a DIY way where I'm not as happy with it, because I don't want people listening to season 1 being pumped for season 2, checking it out and being like, this sounds like some dude with like an 8-track recorder in his basement all of a sudden. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
I want the sound effects again. I want like all the extra little goodies that were in there, because it really added this richness to it,
It did. Yeah. No, you noticed it. I mean, for guys like us who obviously do sweat over some of the small details, although it doesn't always come out that way. This stuff, it's a big leap going from just plugging in a Yeti and talking into it versus really thinking about editing and producing and sound quality and that stuff.
Mm-hmm. What was your favorite episode to do? Do you have a favorite?
Oh, shoot. You know what? I
love them all. I love all my children, right? You just can't pick one.
No, that's not true. I can. I got like 3 or 4 in mind. I really did like the Krishnamacharya episode. I thought that was kind of spicy, but I find Vivekananda, I find that guy to be so compelling. I am just like endlessly intrigued by this guy. Yeah. He just seems, I think he might be an alien or something. I don't know where he came from. And the fact that he just sort of showed up and then died so young, and ending season 1 with that speech that he gave in Chicago was, I just felt like
at the World's Fair, right?
Yeah, it was just like, I don't know. It really, it was just like one of those like, yeah moments.
Yeah. So before we get into like Vivekananda and Krishnamacharya, tell us, how did you get into all this stuff? And I know that you also have your religious studies background, a background in kinesiology. Like, take us to how you started to put these things together.
Well, it all started back in 1996. It did, actually.
It did.
Yeah,
it did.
For real. I was at the University of Regina, where I teach now.
Okay.
I was taking a course on religious symbolism, and the prof, interesting dude, kind of quirky. He's Korean. He's a Quaker, just like a really interesting guy. Knows a lot about Buddhism, but he's a Christian. Anyway, interesting dude. We became friends over the course of the semester. So I would just sort of pop into his office and hang out with him all the time, just because
he was interesting.
He was an interesting guy, and back then people did that. Like, students used to just like go to your prof's office and hang out. And midway through the semester, he was like, "I read your assignments and stuff. You must be into yoga, right?" I'm like, "Nope, never heard of it." Like, I obviously have heard of it, but like, at the time I was in a punk band. I was a singer in a band, and like, we're touring. we just like thrashed all the time. I love destroying my voice on stage. It was like, that was what I did. So I'm like, no, freaking, I'm going to wear like some leotard. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm not Suzanne Summers yoga. And he's
Yeah.
like, no, 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 no. I don't think you understand. So he gave me a copy of the Yoga Sutras, and he was like, okay, whatever was on the syllabus, forget that. You're not doing that anymore. Here's your new thing. You're going to read this Yoga Sutras. You're going to examine it for religious symbolism, and then you're going to like write an essay for me on yoga by the end of the semester.
Wow.
And that freaking did it. Like that was it. I had already pretty much wrapped up a degree in sociology by that point.
Mhm.
And I was like, well, apparently I'm not in sociology anymore. Now I'm in
Yep.
religious studies.
Yep.
I never cared about yoga. Apparently now yoga is my whole thing.
Yeah. By the way, which interpretation or edition of Yoga Sutras did you read?
It was
You remember?
York Feuerstein's,
Okay.
which not my favorite now. At the time, I
He's
was
really
like,
into psychology too. Is he like Jungian psychology?
yeah, I don't know,
Yeah.
kind of. I don't know. I'm
It
not.
wasn't
I'm not going to talk. I'm not going to talk smack about Feuerstein. He's dead. So
right.
he's a luminary.
Right.
So great translation and commentary. But
Yeah.
yeah.
What was it that your professor you think saw? Like, what did he see in your curiosity and interest that made him think like he might dig the sutras?
I've never asked.
Really?
Yeah. Probably should have asked.
Well,
He's still
Oh, it's
alive.
interesting. It's interesting.
Is he still alive?
He
Okay.
is,
Well,
yeah.
then,
You should ask him. It's interesting. He had you start there as opposed to like the Gita, or something like that,
Mhm.
or an intro book on yoga or something.
Yeah.
But that's great.
Yeah. So
all right. So that lit the spark.
Studied yoga a whole bunch. Was really into yoga without ever taking a yoga class. I didn't take my first yoga class until it was probably about 3 years later.
Wow.
And then only took that class because I got a job at a yoga studio working at their front desk. And they were like, we'll give you the job because you know a lot about yoga, but you're going to have to actually do some yoga. So I sort of reluctantly, it was like, fine, I'll do this stupid thing that's not even real yoga and it's for idiots.
Yeah.
And then
Where's my suit?
frickin' fell in love with that too.
Yeah.
What
Do you
was
remember
the
what
name of
was
the
it, like a
class?
vinyasa or like a ashtanga?
More like Iyengar style.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and so my first teacher is a guy named David McCammond. He's dead now too. He started off. He had Iyengar certification, but then was doing workshops with other yoga teachers and like building kind of hybrid styles the way everybody does now. It's just it's just the normal thing to do. And the Iyengars basically contacted him and said, if you keep doing that, you're going to lose your certification. So he said, I think I have a good idea of what to do with that certification. Anyone listening should know I just made a up your butt gesture with my hand.
So your certification is not framed in the middle of your dining room wall? No. Is that what you're saying?
I never got Iyengar certified. I was on that path while David was Iyengar certified. That was what he had in mind for me. But as I was studying with him, he like gave up his certification. He told me he's going to start doing what he called pirate yoga. So his thing is, I just board the ships, take the booty, bail.
Yep.
I don't know, Derek, about you, but I've never actually met anybody who got into yoga by not starting with the physical practice first.
I think it's rare. I agree.
Then went deeper, right? So I think, especially that you went 3 years without ever going into a yoga studio to take an asana class. I think that's fascinating because it actually kind of gave you the right way to approach it. So I'm curious if you could take a moment to talk about your perspective. You were a, let's call it a student of yoga for 3 years. So I'm curious what your perspective was on the physical practice, on asana, as you started looking at yoga, and as you started looking at everybody around you who was starting the opposite way or starting the way that most people start.
Yeah. So I absolutely did do it backwards. That is not the standard way to access yoga. Typically, you start with stretching and then later you get interested in some of the philosophy.
Mm.
My perspective on like yoga classes, just a normal yoga class, was that it is this sort of like broken, corrupted, absurd version of yoga that nobody should
Mm-hmm.
waste their time on.
Mm.
That it's not actually yoga. It is some stretching and calisthenics with a couple of namastes thrown in along the way. Um, Now I changed my mind in a hurry. It did not take long. As soon as I started practicing, it became very, very evident to me that my perspective on what yoga really is just kind of a stupid thing. I hate when yoga teachers are like, what yoga is, fill in the blank. They always love that. Yoga is this,
Yep.
yoga is
Yep.
that. The reality is yoga is hundreds of different things, and literally too, not just like in our imagination. You can go to the Sanskrit English dictionary, look up the word yoga, check out how long that entry is. It is literally, the word means so many different things. But the way I thought of yoga as this sort of like a path to transcendence. It's like it's something that you use, is a tool that you use to help get out of our regular, mundane, material existence, and actually sort of, it sounds kind of corny now. Like it seemed, I'm embarrassed to say so, but it's like, it's a tool for enlightenment is what it's there
Mhm.
for. The whole
Yeah.
point of doing yoga is to be enlightened. Um, Back then I had no issue saying that with my whole chest. I was like, I do yoga for enlightenment. Uh, Now it just seems so silly to say it, right?
Yeah.
But that was
Hold
it.
my block while I go do this pose, right?
Yeah. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, and then, but honestly, it was like a couple classes in, I was like, oh, I actually am having moments here where
Yeah.
like these are very similar to meditation experiences that I'm having while I'm doing freaking calisthenics. And so that really intrigued me. And that was the thing that actually got me into teacher training. And now, God, 25 years later, it's
Yeah.
like it's my job.
So your undergraduate and your master's? Do you have a master's and you have a doctorate as well, or just a master's?
I stopped short of the doctorate degree just because
Yeah.
I academia is a little bit brutal. It's a little bit
Yeah.
rough. And I was like,
Like the payoff's hard, right?
yeah,
Spending all that time into a doctorate and getting.
totally. And like the likelihood is I would end up with roughly the same job.
Yep. Yep.
It's not like I would have more job security, but my job itself would be roughly the same, but tack on an extra 6 years of education and however many dollars.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, degree in sociology. That was the bachelor's degree, and then the master's
Hmm.
degree in religious studies, and the focus was on yoga.
So did you do any studying at school on kinesiology and take classes, or was that outside of your academic?
Yeah, it's strange that I ended up in kinesiology. Actually, like there was a class in my university on yoga and tai chi, and I don't even know it was that. Well, I do know it was the teacher at the time who she was teaching this course. She was like, "I'm going to retire, and I want to make sure there's somebody who can actually teach this thing,
Mm-hmm.
who's going to stick." And she was like, would you be interested in taking it over? And I was like, well, I'll try it for a semester. And yeah, even though it's a kinesiology course, because it's on, the name of the course is the philosophy and practice of yoga and tai chi.
Mm-hmm.
I'd studied a bunch of Taoism already. I'd practiced some Tai Chi, obviously, a lot of background in yoga and teaching yoga. So I was like, it actually is a really natural fit, even
Yeah.
though I've never actually taken a kinesiology course.
Can you talk a little bit about, you had, how long were you studying, being a practitioner and whatnot before you got to go to India?
It happened quick. I so finished. I start. This is kids. Don't do what I did. I started teaching before I finished teacher training.
Yeah.
So I honestly, I went from, hey, you should take a yoga class to teacher training in probably like 6 months.
Wow.
The program was a year. I was teaching before that year was over. So that, in retrospect, I wouldn't suggest anybody do that. I don't think that that was smart. But it wasn't like I was sort of pursuing it. That just sort of happened. So I think I
Mm.
started doing yoga in '99. I probably started teaching by like 2001 and went to India in 2002.
But prior to that, you were a religious studies major and whatnot, right? And
I
you were
was
like,
I was knee deep in yoga. Like it was
yeah,
pretty much all I thought about.
yeah. So what was it like for you? Derek and I were just talking the other day, like, man, someday you and I got to take a trip to India together and visit these places. Like, what was it like for the first time to go? How do you even know where to go?
Um, well, fortunately, I had this friend of mine there, right? So it was like she met me at the airport, and she was friends with my teacher David. So the first time I went there, she met us at the airport, got us back to Pune from Mumbai, and then just kind of like started introducing me to people and taking me around to Mumbai and showing me places. Now, the second time when I went back in, I think it was 2005 or 2006, um, I was doing research for my master's degree. And for that one, I was interviewing yoga teachers and yoga gurus. And that one, honestly, I was able to get a little bit of research done from home in terms of like roughly places I wanted to go and people I wanted to talk to. But a lot of it, I would just show up in a city and just start trying to find yoga teachers and then let
Mm.
one yoga teacher lead me to the next. So who is your teacher? Who would you recommend that I go talk to? Who's the best teacher that you know? Who's the most experienced teacher? And it was literally just sort of like bouncing from place to place, and apologizing a lot for how ignorant I am.
And that's a great segue because I'm curious, as you did that, how wide did the divide get that you saw between yoga in India and yoga in the West?
It depends from place to place. Like,
Mm.
so if we were to, let's say, hey, in 3 days, let's meet up in Mumbai. Get a plane ticket. The three of us are going to go to Mumbai. We'll stay in a really nice hotel on Juhu Beach. There's like Bollywood stars everywhere. It's freaking awesome. They've got like these big hookahs that look like AK-47s you can smoke out of by the pool. It's great. Highly recommend. But we go down the street and find a yoga studio nearby one of these fancy hotels in Juhu. You could be anywhere in the world.
Mm.
It's not different. It's not different at all. It is like going to a yoga class in LA or New York.
Wow.
It's just it's the same thing. But you'll go from there to like all of a sudden I show up at an ashram and I need to kind of like prove that I'm worthy before I can even see the guru. And the guru's not interested in anything I say or do. He has questions for me instead of the other way around. And it feels almost like I'm stepping back in time or something.
Mm.
It's like a totally different experience of yoga altogether. And um, it's awesome actually. Like I quite like it. But it's
I
a little,
bet.
it's intimidating, right? Like
I would totally.
yeah, like I spend most of my time literally kind of with my head down being like, I don't know what's going on here. Like, you're not made to feel like that in most yoga studio environments. You're meant to feel like welcome, and people are like offering you towels and water that's been soaked in cucumbers or something.
Yeah, yeah.
You go, a lot of the ashrams you go to in India, it's like, here's your bucket.
And it's like a 4-hour class. It's like this class never ends.
Yeah.
It doesn't end until the sun sets, right?
Yeah, a lot of violence too. There's teachers in Rishikesh that are really violent. They hit you a lot.
Really?
A lot of hitting.
Like to reprimand you in
Yeah,
your
a
pose?
lot of hitting, a lot of yelling.
Yeah.
Like corporal punishment in India is pretty normal.
So is there a same was there a same focus on asana and the range of asanas in India, or was it more of like you're just sitting in lotus pose, more meditating and chanting?
Again, like depending on where you
It
go.
depends. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So yeah, honestly, go to a yoga class in New Delhi, and you're like, you're gonna do that step back to warrior one, warrior two. Now we're going to do exalted warrior and a side plank. You're just like, oh, here we
yeah,
go.
yeah,
This is that class, right?
yeah,
And then, yeah, absolutely, you could end up in a class where it's like, sit down, shut up.
yeah,
I'll talk to you in an hour.
yeah.
Don't move. And if you move, there's somebody staring at you, shaking their head, being like, "What's wrong with you?"
Look at that encouragement. Everyone, you get a ribbon. You get a ribbon.
Yeah.
You get a ribbon. Um,
Wow.
so Vivekananda, let's jump back there. I want to talk a little bit about Vivekananda and Krishnamacharya and sort of the emergence of the modern Western style yoga. But Vivekananda first, who was he and what was so significant about his impact on yoga as we know it?
He so he's got two lives. And this is, I think, one of the things that makes him kind of like a space alien. It just makes him a very, very different person. So he has a very traditional guru, and he's sort of like in that very standard yoga guru role. He has his teacher. His teacher tells him what the truth is, and that's the truth. End of story. Period. You devote your life to yoga and meditation, and eventually you'll become enlightened. Um, he's also a political activist, though. So he's a freedom fighter. He believes in Indian independence, and he wants to use yoga to build up the cause of Indian independence. And so there's this sort of like spiritual side and political side to him, that I think created an individual that was like unlike most people. At the same time, fully from India, obviously, he's an Indian man. He's got an Indian name. Narendra was his name, but Western educated. So all the universities at the time were in English. And so when you listen to his voice at that Parliament of World Religions in Chicago in 1893, there's no Indian accent there. Like his English is perfect. In fact, much, much more perfect than most English speakers' English.
Right, right.
He's incredibly educated, very sharp intellect, and I think very self-conscious. So he didn't just show up one day in North America and be like, here's yoga. Like
Yeah.
it was very, very self-conscious of like, how should I introduce this? How do I introduce this to these people?
He knew the audience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so everything was really, really self-conscious, really thoughtful. And that was just sort of the person that he was.
Yep.
Is this like, I would say it sounds kind of corny, but he's a visionary. Like the guy was so far ahead of his time.
Yeah.
He had this vision of a yoga that was like globalized. It was like
Yeah.
all over the world, and it could connect people from different countries and different classes. No matter who you were in the world, you could practice yoga. And when you did that, you had this sense of sort of coming together with people. He knew that yoga could do that like 100 years before yoga did that.
And he was born in the 1860s. Is that right? Like he's coming of age 1880s, 1890s. He's starting to hit his stride. It's probably like, I don't know. I'm not an expert on British colonial India, but it's sort of at the apex of the British Raj system, right?
We are the beginning of the end.
Beginning
Right?
of the end. Okay. So it's about to go in its autumn, so to speak.
Yeah.
So he's super familiar, obviously, and educated in the British Western system.
Yep.
And so he has this brilliant ability to kind of, have a foot in both worlds and understand how to link the two.
Absolutely.
And so he gets to the World's Fair in Chicago. Was it 1896, like around there?
Yep. Give or take. Yeah.
And then he really takes the stage, right?
Yeah, no, he became an overnight sensation. Like it's so funny to think about it now, but like pe- people, it sounds crazy to say it. People didn't know that there were people from India who were like highly educated and intelligent and literate.
Wow.
They didn't know that. Like they in their mind, they're like, these are like superstitious people that are kind of backward. That's the colonial mindset, right? And
Yep. Yep.
colonial people are like, we're up here, everybody else in the world is down here.
Mm-hmm.
So when this guy shows up and he's like up way, his level of thinking is clearly beyond most people's. It blew. Minds were blown. People were like, good God, man, tell me more.
Yeah.
And it really, I think it blew the doors wide open where people were like, ah, we've been thinking about this wrong. Like we have been looking in the wrong places for our answers.
Yeah.
For my own understanding of timeline and stuff, so you've got Vivekananda, and then that next wave would be Yogananda and like Krishnamurti. Is that right? And
Uh,
they would pretty much pick up where
Or
he
more
left off.
Krishnamacharya and those guys, right?
well, yeah, it's
It depends. They sort of splinter, right? They're kind of in
it's yeah,
different lanes.
and it is different lanes. Like so Yogananda and like that sort of self-realization fellowship group
Yeah.
only really marginally interested in postures. Like a little bit, but for them it's the meditation practice. Now there were post Vivekananda a number of people from India coming over to America and doing this like sort of Swami circuit where they're traveling around and there's all kinds of like what they would. It was a super cool actually. So a lot of them would do like tricks, right? So you've seen people do like naoli where they suck their stomach in and roll their stomach around. They would do stuff like that just to sort of like impress upon you that they have something you don't have,
Right,
right?
right.
So they're showmen. So what they would do though is like rent out like a ballroom in a hotel, take out an ad in the newspaper, and say like, "Oh, magical mysteries from the East," and people would show up to these lectures, public lectures in a ballroom. But then they would also have a suite that they would rent out upstairs, and you could during that lecture series or demonstration thing that they would do, you could get private classes with them. And this like there's a long chain of like many teachers coming over and doing just that. So like Yogananda was one of them, but there was another guy also named Yogananda who had to change his name because Yogananda already made a name for himself. There's like multiple Yoganandas, like because no one wants to show up and be like, "Hey, my name's Don." Right?
Right,
They all
right.
sort of like have like a stage name. It's always something Ananda,
Yeah.
and yeah, lots and lots of them. And the more I study this stuff, the more I realize the timeline is never going to be clear because there's way too many like dead ends where we can find there was this guy, he showed up, he taught in 4 or 5 different towns, he established a little bit of a following, people remember their grandparents taking classes with this guy,
Mm.
but that's all we know. Now, did he change his name and come back and teach as somebody else? Did he not, was he not able to get a visa again and just went back to India and was a cab driver? Like there's just so much like untold history there, and it's one of the things that kind of like I'm really fascinated by is like let's dig into that phase of history so that we can start to maybe clarify that timeline a little bit. Krishnamacharya the whole time is in India, completely unimpressed and completely uninterested in what's happening in North America. Like he has no interest whatsoever in traveling to North America and trying to win an audience, like zero.
Yeah.
He doesn't want white people
His
studying
only
this.
audience was at the Mysore Palace, right?
Yeah, and it's kids. He liked teaching kids.
So Krishnamacharya, so tell us a little bit about how he was influenced by some of the German and British gymnastics at the palace at the time, and how he evolved what he was doing, and how that kind of inspired Patabi Joy and
Mhm.
in some ways Iyengar. Yeah, take us a little bit through that, because that was a great episode in the podcast when
Yeah,
you got
it's
into some of the stuff.
such interesting material.
That was a that
And
was the award winning of all the award winning episodes you had. That was the most award winning.
So part of the thing, again, it's this weird timeline stuff. There's timeline things that don't make sense in the story,
Yeah.
that I don't know that we're ever going to get really clear on exactly what's happening there. But there's a couple of things we know for sure. He is hired by the king, the Maharaja of Mysore, and his job is basically to kind of like translate texts at first. He's a translator, and make those texts accessible to people. So he's translating from Sanskrit into Hindi. Um, and this is done really to kind of like bring more of a sense of Indian identity, pride in Indian identity, to build Indian nationalism, which you say nationalism these days, and people are like, oh, flag waving,
Yep.
patriotic, blah blah blah. For a colonized country, nationalism is probably a really really good idea. It's a
Yep.
really good solution to colonization. It's better than just sort of taking on
It's a
the identity.
counterbalance to like the oppression of
Yeah,
colonizers. Yep.
exactly.
Mhm.
So that's his job, is to do that. Now, I think what happened is that he got his hands on some old Hatha Yoga textbooks that had drawings of pictures. He started translating those and playing around with some of the postures, and said to the king, hey, this is kind of interesting in terms of like building a sense of kind of national identity. What about yoga practice? That's something we could actually like go around and teach to people, right? Um, the problem is Hatha Yoga, as it was practiced in medieval India, is kind of gross and weird. It's not something that people would want to. People don't want to take a stick of turmeric and put it up their butt.
Or
Um,
the string up one nostril and pull it out the other, right?
People don't want to do that stuff. People don't want to just stand on their head for 20 minutes and hope for the best. Like that, it wasn't a very good show. Like it just wasn't very
Yeah.
compelling. So I think what he did is start finding ways to make it more compelling and more interesting, and that's where you start getting these fascinating like hybrids of classical hatha yoga postures designed to get more semen into your brain, that have been like adapted to blend elements of Indian wrestling, Indian martial arts, Indian
Yep.
dance, and then ultimately even some of these sort of like physical culture, calisthenics exercises that a lot of it came from Denmark. This guy named Niels Bohr.
Wow.
So he sort of hybridizes all this stuff, puts it together, which to me is, I imagine that, like you're gonna just like go on YouTube, look at like 30 different modalities of movement, and now invent one, create a hybrid of all those. Like, come on.
I don't know. It worked for the Beastie Boys and Paul's Boutique. It did work pretty well.
It's because it works for geniuses.
Create a whole sampling industry. No, you're right. Actually, he was a polymath, though. He was an absolute genius, right?
For real.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
it works because he's a genius. Not everybody can do that. It's freaking amazing. And what happens is he develops this system of yoga that is actually like really, really cool to look at. It is objectively beautiful. It becomes an art object. It had never been that before. It had never been a show. But he turns it into a show, and they have these like what are called propaganda tours,
Yep.
where they tour from town to town, and he's got this like troupe of performing children that he hits with sticks until they do the postures
Yeah.
right on stage.
Oh, I remember you hitting on a Yangar. Like a Yangar couldn't do like the Hanumast.
Hanumanasana, yeah.
Thank you. Like basically a split on the ground, right? And he couldn't do it. And did he force him, or he had the shorts cut because he said if my shorts were too
Cut his shorts, pushed him down, tore his hamstring.
Tore a hamstring.
on stage.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's nuts. And it sounds like most of the stuff that he had this group perform was stuff that super nimble, like 11-year-old kids could do, not adults with adult muscles and adult bodies, right?
You know, and again, this to me is so fascinating. Open up Instagram, start scrolling through stories of yoga people doing yoga things. And like most of us go like, oh, look at this. All these like skinny white girls doing skinny white girl things. Ugh, like modern yoga. So gross. It's so they say the same kind of thing I said when I started doing yoga. This isn't real yoga. This is like exhibition, right? This is just like you're just showing off. Well, as it turns out, it wasn't skinny white girls that invented it. It was Krishnamacharya.
Yeah.
Right. That show, if we had cameras, if we took video of that show, we could post it on Instagram and skinny white girls around the world be like double clicking. I love this.
Yeah.
My apologies to skinny white girls. I love you, skinny white girls. Please don't get the wrong impression. I need you. We all need you. You are the thing that keeps yoga afloat. We love you.
It's not a huge chunk of our listenership, but we appreciate you being welcoming.
I tell you,
we welcome them all. We don't discriminate.
They are everywhere.
They are everywhere.
They are legion.
So let me ask you this: was it Krishnamacharya who really got the sun salutations moving, or was that Pattabhi Joy or somebody else at the time? What's your guess on that?
Well, here's my shot at getting yoga canceled. I don't mean yoga is going to get canceled. I mean, I'm going to get yoga canceled. I think they're push-ups. I think we have a record of this text. There's an author named Joseph Alter, and he wrote a book about wrestling traditions in India. He found this book called the Malapuram that's like all these like old wrestling techniques, and it's a 1500s, 1600s, quite old. And there's a description in there of how to do a push-up. It's exactly like a sun salutation. Like he is describing how to do a sun salutation. Now that phrase Surya Namaskar, you find that in the Vedas, right? We're going back 3,000 years, old school. But if you look at the Vedas and you look at the description of what they mean when they say Surya Namaskar, they literally mean bowing your head. It is like bowing your head to a deity. They're not describing a movement. There's no sequence of postures. It is literally just like bowing. It's a prostration. That's all it is. And that's all it ever was until the 1920s. When Krishnamacharya starts hybridizing and bringing things in, he sees wrestlers doing these push-ups, and he's like, that's cool. I like that. That's yoga now. What are we going to call it? Well, we can't call it a push-up. It's a sun salutation. It's a Surya Namaskar. I think sun salutations are about 100 years old. And absolutely not Pattabhi Joy's. Pattabhi Joy's, he's on the record, actually, of saying, I only teach what I was taught. I have not invented anything. I don't create anything. All I do is teach what my teacher taught me. And so for sure, it was Krishnamacharya that sort of like developed these Surya Namaskar movements. Now, I have seen some other research around Surya Namaskar because there's multiple different kinds. So there's one that is done by the Ashtanga Vinyasa folks. That's Surya Namaskar A and B. But there's another sun salutation that starts by like doing on like a standing back bend. So you stand up and stretch your arms up and lean back. And in that one, you don't jump back to chaturanga after the forward bend. You step back into a lunge and then drop down from the lunge to chaturanga. So the sequence is different. And from what I can tell, although I need to look this up and be a little bit more clear before I start making any pronouncements, this was designed by somebody who's really into, guess what? Kinesiology. He was a gym teacher, an Indian gym teacher who developed this like exercise for students to do in the morning before they go to school. So a couple different sun salutations with some different origin stories.
So what? So, okay. We're talking 100, 150 years ago. This stuff gets put together. But isn't it fascinating how well it works?
Yeah.
How profound it can be for someone to take all these things and put this little pie together of physical postures that have such a profound effect.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Well,
crazy.
it is crazy. And like, I think, people sometimes, I hear people occasionally taking this stuff, this historical data, and going like, there, yoga's 100 years old, solved it. It's like, whoa, 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 whoa. We have evidence of people doing yoga postures as far back as 700 in the Common Era. So we know it's not 100 years old. There were lots and lots of people doing yoga postures. It's like that modern thing of like triangle pose and downward dog and warrior two and planks and side plank. All that's 100 years old, but lots and lots of yoga postures and lots of history of people using their bodies and using physical postures to create changes that they can feel emotionally and mentally. And so I think that like you could imagine all these people doing these postures for a number of different reasons, mostly for like immortality, would be like why hatha yogis would do it. They almost kind of like paved the road. They got the road paved for us about like how do we use these postures? What kind of what do they mean and how do you do them? And then after 1,000 years or so of people practicing postures to affect changes in their mind, now we start adding more and more postures and more potential changes to our minds. So the different postures, I think, come with different. I don't know. Vibes sound so stupid, but you know what I mean. The postures have different effects on us.
They do,
Yeah.
and not just hitting different muscles, but I also think you're just remapping your nervous system every time you're doing something a little different.
Yeah.
And sure, you could like totally overdo it and end up having, a torn labrum or other hip or shoulder issues.
Mhm.
But you are certainly creating a sense of awareness in your whole body.
Mhm.
And I even know the irony of this is not really what the yoga was, beyond 100 years ago. It's sort of evolved into something that's super accessible and you can utilize in many ways for many types of benefits. And stress reduction, sleep, just, helping facilitate some energy in your body if you're fighting a cold bug or whatever it is.
Mhm.
Warming up for hockey, I do a little bit of that just to get ready for hockey in the morning. But it's kind of amazing, as Larry was saying, like it's totally come around and like it isn't really exactly what we thought it was, but it's evolved into something that's pretty cool.
Mhm. Well, yeah, and like exactly like you said, Larry, it's like it works. It works. Like and like the thing that I always find so fascinating too is that like to some extent it to me is like it's the opposite of a religion. I come from this religious studies background. In a religion, you kind of have to believe in it for it to work. You know what I mean? Like you got there's this element of faith. One of the things that has drawn me to yoga for all these years, zero faith. My teacher, he constantly would say to me, "Don't believe me. Do not believe when I say this. Don't believe me. Try it for yourself. You have to. If you don't try it for yourself, you won't actually know." One. So yeah, I'm gonna love up my teacher for a second here. So Dave McCammond, he said to me, 1/3 of what I teach you is absolutely irrelevant. You don't need it. 1/3 of what I teach you, it's poison for you. It's terrible. It is like one of the worst things you could ever do. And 1/3 of it is gold. 1/3 of it is, it's the gem. It's going to change your life. It's going to make your life so much better. My job as a teacher, give you those 3 things. Just give them to you. Your job as a student, figure out which is which. Which one's irrelevant, which one's gold, which one's poison, and there's only one way to find out. Practice.
You just do it.
Practice. Just practice. Just do it. You'll find out. You'll figure out which one is which. So it's really interesting because it does work. Yoga is amazing. Why? Because we adapt it. Right? We practice it. We adapt it. We figure out what stuff works for us and what stuff doesn't. So of course it works when we do it well. When we say as yoga teachers, okay, everybody, do this. And I demonstrate a thing. Everybody do this. And then all the students do the thing. And they're all basically trying to mimic me or mirror what I'm doing. It's not going to work. Never works because they're not adapting it to themselves, right? They're not finding out which third is which. But in that moment where you figure out, oh, what you just taught me is bogus. That is garbage. I'm not doing that thing that you just taught me. And then the very next thing they teach is like, oh, wait a minute. Now that's good. Now we're cooking. Like now this is like actually yoga that's sort of like tailor made. Like it's actually like by design specifically for us. Woo! That is like Ric Flair material. It is good. It's really, really good.
Yeah. I said to someone, Derek, I think I probably said it to you once, like the secret power that all yoga teachers have is yoga. It's just passing this thing on. And so as a teacher, like it's just your thing as a person to guide somebody through the thing to get them to the end of class when you see that look in their eye, right? Everybody comes into class, they're all like, blah, 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 blah. And then at the end of class, they just have that far away sort of look and they all just look good. You're like, man, all I did was just give you the thing. I just gave you the thing and you did it and it works.
Yeah.
And the thing changes. Like, I mean, here we are, we're 3 guys, probably 50 or over 50 or mid 50s or whatever. I won't speak for you, Larry.
Yeah,
you know, so, but like,
28.
you know, when we're 20, exactly. You know, when we're 70 or when we're 80, like the yoga is it's going to evolve and there's still going to be a thing. And that thing's going to be unique for where we are at that point of our lives, you know? And I think that's what's kind of, I think, you know, cool about yoga is that, you know, you have this ability to see and feel and understand what you need and don't need in order to keep you balanced and kind of keep you on the right path. I just think it's like, it's endless.
Ideally it is. Like ideally, yoga teachers are providing tools to their students that they don't even need yet. They won't need them. They won't need them until they do, right? So, you know, try to teach Shavasana to a 5-year-old. Good freaking luck. Not going to happen. They're not going to sit still. Never mind 5, 15. They're not going to do it. They're not going to sit still. But they get it. They hear it. And they're like, they start learning how to sort of actually consciously down-regulate their system. In 5 years, they're in university. They're freaking out. And they're like, I remember that yoga teacher got me on my back and turned the lights down and started talking like this. And when they did, I theoretically could have relaxed. I didn't, but I potentially could have. And so you're actually like giving people tools for life. Not necessarily that they're going to use right now, but they could potentially use them who knows when. And that's that is valuable. That is very valuable material.
Yeah, that's amazing. We're going to start bringing it home, Colin. And I feel like, you know, Derek's going to agree with me. We got to bring you back. We got to pick a thing and we got to bring you back because this is rich.
It might be nice to kind of do like more of a
A focused thing.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
But
cool. But this is a nice introduction for people to
yeah.
get to know who you are, get to know who what your podcast is, because it's coming back. Okay, people, we're gonna bring that podcast back. One little pitch. Give us one pitch to guys out there. When you hear guys are like, I can't do that. I can't touch my toes. I'm not flexible, right? And what's your pitch? Help us, help Derek and I get more guys on the mat.
Hmm. Well, I'll tell you the pitch that I don't like first.
Mm.
The pitch I don't like is you you think yoga's for girls. Yoga's super tough. It's like a truck commercial where you do your muscles and you. I hate that. That is like the dumbest thing ever. It's so dumb. Like the, as if there's a shortage of that. We don't know where could we find like come on. There's everywhere in the world. We don't need it.
Yeah.
So that's the pitch I don't like. The pitch I do like. I think knowing what you are feeling and knowing what you are thinking is a superpower. And it's a superpower that a lot of men have not learned, not because they're not doing a good job, but because people around them have decided men don't need to learn this stuff. Men don't need to know what they're feeling or what they're thinking. It's unnecessary. What they need to do is like push through, suck it up, right? I think that's messaging that a lot of us, I know I have it in my head. And it is like job one. It is like very first class, very first thing you're going to hear is like, so what are you feeling right now? What goes on in your body right now? And my aim is when my wife says, what are you thinking? What are you thinking about right now? What's going on in your head? That I don't look at her and go like, nothing. That's stupid. It's stupid and it's childish. You do know what you're thinking. You do have thoughts and feelings. We need practices to help us actually like figure that out. And yoga is such a great place to start for that stuff. It's cheaper than therapy. It's way more fun. And it's at a bare minimum. It will make you feel better along the way. Like your body physically will feel better, but you're going to pick up like life skills that are going to be actually valuable to you in the meantime. That's a good pitch.
Amen.
That's a nice pitch right there.
That's a great pitch.
I love that. It won't fit on a t-shirt, Colin, but
right.
we'll take it, bro. We'll take it. Colin Hall, this was awesome, dude. Thank you so much for coming on, and stay warm up there.
Oh yeah,
in Canada. Derek?
That's it, man. We'd love to get you back. We'll be in touch later this year. And thanks again for making time with us.
my pleasure. Yeah, really fun. Had a great chat.